Have time for some questions for Stephanie. Would anyone like to start? Yes.
Hello. I just wanted to ask you about the concept of enlightenment that a lot of spiritual followers are aiming for, and also talking more about spirituality. This age that we're in at the moment is, has been kind of predicted as some kind of golden age, talking astrologically about, the evolution of mankind. I was just wondering what your thoughts are, and I also noticed that you said that we are inadequate to create heaven on earth. Is that really what you think?
Okay, quite a lot of questions. I'll just go through them a little bit. The question of enlightenment need not concern us very much, but I think what it really calls to me or speaks to me about is that we would wake up to our potential. So I can answer the end of your questions also at the same time, that if we only rely on our ego and personality strengths, we can't bring heaven to earth. That we really have to wake up to our soul strengths. And enlightenment is, to a very large extent, waking up to who and what we really are. Which is that we are souls having a human journey. But I'm really reluctant to be too specific about definitions, because our human family has gone to war and slaughtered one another around definitions throughout our history. So if I can say it just much, much more gently, that if we can wake up to our strengths, to our potential, and through the experience of that, discover for ourselves, which is of course one of the great teachings of Buddhism, that these profound things we in a way must discover for ourselves, that they can't be imposed on us, that if we discover for ourselves that we do indeed have strengths, qualities, generosities that go beyond just what we generally call ego or personality strengths. I can't prove to you that you are a soul in a human body, and I also absolutely do not need to. But what I can show through the examples in my books and through the example of my own life is that when I begin to use this as a resource, and this is very crucial in terms of peacemaking, by the way, it is very crucial in terms of conduct. When I begin to really see that my resources are profound, it not only shifts my experience of who I am, it also shifts my view of who you are. Now, some of you will know, and I write about this at some length in Seeking the Sacred, because in many ways it's a spiritual memoir, that for more than 20 years, my major Christian practice was as a Quaker, as a member of the Religious Society of Friends. And I was very attracted to the Quakers because they are the least dogmatic expression of Christianity, and also because they are very unconditionally committed to peacemaking, both between individuals, by the way, as well as between communities and nations. We can often be very high-minded about peacemaking between nations and rather neglectful of peacemaking between us and the neighbours next door who play their music too loud. Yeah? So one of the things that I loved about the Quakers, and that I also very much admire about Buddhist teachings, is that there is a great focus on conduct. And I also think conduct is incredibly important. That if we're not paying attention to conduct, we're not paying attention to anything. This, above all, is the key teaching for me in Christianity. This, above all, love one another. But the founder, I'm giving a longish answer, but I think you raised such good points. The founder, one of the founders of the Religious Society of Friends in the 17th century in England, was a marvellous radical called George Fox. And he had this exquisite teaching. Walk lightly on this earth. That's already marvellous, isn't it? Walk lightly on this earth. Even bring lightness to your heart as you walk on this earth. Answering that of God in every way. And for me, that has been absolutely key throughout my life. That if there is a soul life, if there is that of God within me, then it has to be true of everyone, or it is true of no one. For me, that is utterly defining, which is why I'm an interfaith minister and not a Christian minister, even though my formation is Christian. It's absolutely crucial to me that when I welcome people at my services, or at my retreats, or at any teaching, that there is total inclusivity. And for me, that has been at least a step towards the waking up that some might call enlightenment. That we are in this together. That we are either all souls, or we're all just body and mind and decaying. I hope that answered. I won't go to the Golden Age questions because it's speculation. And I really want us to think about what will happen that will help us right now, today, 25th of March, 2014. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Just one very brief question. You defined spirituality, I thought, very succinctly. Something within which can express.
Which must express in the way that we live beyond ourselves. Which expresses beyond ourselves, without. It expresses through our conduct. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it expresses through our conduct. Which is why we are never sitting in meditation, for example, only for our own selves. Which is why we're never considering these big questions only for our own selves. Because as we move through the world, we are affecting everyone with whom we come in touch. Are we affecting them for the better or for the worse? Yeah, it's so basic. It's, are we affecting them for the better or for the worse? We know how sensitive we are to the way other people affect us. We are affecting others too. We have as much power to affect others positively as they have to us. I think we need to take this self-responsibility very seriously and with a lot of lightness of heart, you know, that we can generate some positivity and some consolation and some forgiveness. Yeah.
I found that you need a lot of courage and determination to implement like a foundational practice.
Yes. Like
what you were talking about before. And in reading about the Dalai Lama, you know, I have great respect for him because he manages to set aside 3 hours every morning.
Yes.
And that's a very Buddhist practice, I suppose. And, you know, I've come to my own practice. I like what you had to say, that everybody interprets those sorts of foundations differently. And I find affirmations really sort of powerful for me.
Yes.
And I constantly, I suppose, like most people, you know, I'm my own worst enemy in terms of sort of criticising myself. And by doing those affirmations, I've found a lot of strength through that. But I wanted to ask you particularly about your foundational practices and you know, what you use on a daily basis, and if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. And I write a lot about how I've learnt to pray in heaven on earth, obviously, and I write quite a lot about my my spiritual evolution more generally in seeking the sacred. But because I've been involved in these questions for so long, and because I've already now lived a long time, and I hope, you know, God willing, to live a bit longer, what I've come to really feel more confident about, and I really can urge you to experiment with this also, is to bring the awareness of spiritual practice into your entire day. into your entire life, so that in a way everything is spiritual practice. So we need, I think, some times for settling the mind, reminding ourselves who and what we are, reminding ourselves what strengths we have. Often I'm using that time with prayer as my kind of diving board and then moving into silence. Sometimes I go from silence into prayer. But then through the day, I will also be using that as my, not just my compass setting, but as my reference point. And I will also be using my interactions with other people as my spiritual practice. That is my major spiritual practice. That's what reminds me of what I also need to be thinking about. You know? When I come up against myself, as it were, or when someone else inspires me, or when someone reminds me of something. And those moments come in all sorts of ways, once we're open to them. Inspiration is an incredibly important part of all of this. To be open to it, and to be, I guess, look, humble enough to receive it. Courage is a very important part of this. But when I wrote Forgiveness and Other Acts of Love, I put courage right at the beginning, because we need courage to try something a bit different, or to try something familiar a bit differently. But what I wrote in Forgiveness and Other Acts of Love, and I feel it so strongly still, is that courage, like all the qualities, is never discovered as an abstraction. We discover it as we live it. You can't think, oh, I'd like a lot more courage today. No. You can think, I'll approach this with some courage. And thinking about, I will approach this, we're already generating courage. Or, yes, it's a long way from my bed to my cushion, but it's worth it. And I won't choose every day. That's another part that I write about in both these more recent books. If you're going to give yourself the choice every day and say, do I feel like it? You probably won't. That's a very boring thing to do, to give yourself, oh, do I feel like it? So that your emotional state in that moment really rules your life. No, you don't ask yourself, do I feel like flossing my teeth? Or do I feel like making a cup of tea? Or maybe you think. But, you know, there are some things, we mostly wash every day, but there are things that we do routinely to take care of ourselves. We don't ask ourselves every day, do we feel like it? So we are very liberated when we can incorporate at least a moment's recollection, a moment's calming, a moment's remembering of that steady place within ourselves, because God knows, and I really mean that, God knows. We need to be able to go to that place when things are really hard. And if we haven't practiced it, that's what spiritual practice is, practice. If we haven't practiced it, when things are not so hard, it will seem far away when we really, really need it. And I don't know about you, but I really need it reasonably often, either on my own behalf or on behalf of others. Just a couple more questions.
I find in this world that most people are so busy trying to live, consumerism has taken over most of their lives. They're going to work, getting the kids to school, all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, if you spoke to them about soul or spirituality, they'd say, oh, you know, I've got to go to work, I've got to earn the money, I've got to feed the children, you know. That's taken over their life. It's not that they are good people and they're probably spiritual underneath, but they, you know, they haven't got time.
Yes, just very, very briefly, because we want to have another question or two. Actually, I do notice that when people give themselves some time, even just to read a very short passage and to reflect for a moment on it, it actually shifts their relationship to time. Because most people have time to do an awful lot of texting, or an awful lot of social media, or an awful lot of television, or an awful lot of I don't know what. It's not really a question of time. It's really a question of value. What are we valuing? You know, even in a busy family situation, eating a meal together, taking 2 moments beforehand to say, let's just say thank you for this meal. Let's say thank you for being together. Let's say thank you for the day. Even that shifts the atmosphere. It reminds people of how precious, how fleeting all this is. So much of what we are busy with takes us away from what matters, and spiritual practice, even of the most, what we might call ordinary kind, brings us back to what matters, and brings us back actually to the source of our happiness. We can feel very, very fragmented when we never come to that place of the soul. We can feel very fragmented, which is why I started my talk by saying this is an age of anxiety. How do we meet that? So what I'm offering are ways that we meet that. Yes, it is a time in which many people say, I have no time. In fact, it is a question of what we value and how we value ourselves and how we value the strengths that are available to us. And of course, this is an incredibly precious thing to teach our children and our grandchildren. I have a grandchild now. Yeah, not easy, but precious. I think there was one more question.
Oh, yes, there was a gentleman who...
It's not a question so much as an observation. You put strong emphasis on conduct.
Yes, I do.
And that I was very impressed by that. Thank you very much. And I couldn't help thinking when you said, what Shakespeare said, until thine own self be true, and it shall follow as the night the day thou canst not then be false to any man. And that's straight out personal conduct.
Yes, I think personal conduct is very, very important. And I don't think we should either avoid entirely feelings of sorrow and shame when we haven't behaved as well as we could, but nor should we stay in that place. We should learn something from it, we should make amends where needed, and move on. Yeah. Did you want to ask something?
No, I just couldn't hear the question, but
okay.
I heard the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
But in having courage, you've got to have courage to try new things and be
Yes.
willing to fail.
Yes.
Like by always accepting what's safe and what you know you can do, you can get through life. But in really exploring yourself, you've got to be willing to fail. What do you...
Yeah, there is no failure in exploring yourself. Actually, there is no failure in exploring yourself. You can come up against your disappointments.
Yeah, okay,
What a
well, different
wonderful
outcomes
question you
to what
ask.
you
There
expect.
is no failure.
Mhm.
How can there be any failure? Actually, a teacher, Nisargadatta Maharaj, his name is, said there is no failure in the search for God. There is also no failure in the search to understand these questions. There can be no failure. We can notice our failings, but we can also notice how we can go beyond them, how we can learn from them, and even how they bring us with more compassion into the human family. Sometimes we have to fail a lot before we really generate enough compassion for the rest of our brothers and sisters, don't you think?
Yeah.
Really, really. You know, sometimes our arrogance has to have a few
Absolutely.
walks around the block. Yeah. So thank you for that question. Thank you so much for it. There's no failure in asking these questions of ourselves, of one another, and of really, you know, bringing our deepest questions to the front, because they are shaping our lives. They're truly shaping who we're becoming. Well, thank you all again.
Thank you.
And I'll be here for a little while. Abby's bookshop has sent Chris, and I'm so grateful to them. I'm so grateful to the Sydney Mechanics School of Arts. Isn't this a beautiful room?
Yeah.
Such a lovely room. So, and thank you to you so much, Melanie.
Thank you to you also,
Yeah.
Stephanie. Please join me in giving Stephanie a very lovely round of applause. something away from it, so thank you very much. As Stephanie noted, there are some books here from Abby's today. I hope you will take an opportunity to look through them. I'm sure Stephanie wouldn't mind signing them for you.
No, I'd be happy to.
Stephanie also mentioned that she has for the last 8 years been conducting interfaith services at the Pitt Street Uniting Church. That's just 2 doors up, and that's on the 3rd Sunday of every month. So if you want to hear more of her teachings and readings, and I believe you have music as well, please feel free to drop into that service.
3 o'clock on the 3rd Sundays of the month. 3 and 3.
That's good.
3rd Sundays, 3 o'clock. Glorious music, lovely congregation, and all welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And coming up in SMSA in April, being April, we're going to honour our servicemen and women. On the 1st of April, we have a screening of the lovely documentary, The Hunt for HMAS Sydney, which reveals the search for and discovery of the wreck of the Sydney, which finally was able to give closure to the relatives of the men on board, and also recreates the battle between the Sydney and the German ship, the Cormorant. So I hope you'll join us for that. That's lunchtime on 1st of April. Our Poetry at SMSA group are back for another popular public reading in the Tom Keneally Centre on the 9th of April, this time about poems of war. You'll hear poems that celebrate bravery, poems that evoke the experience of battle, the brutality, the horror, and poems that commemorate and mourn the lives tragically cut short through war. I hope you will join us for that again. We have a classic film night coming up on 10th of April, which is Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. Now that's a very long film, 3.5 hours, so we'll be starting early at 5:45 and finishing at 9:30 p.m. But it's a fantastic film, so I hope you'll join us for that as well. And Claire Corbett, who has been co-facilitating our writing masterclasses with Tom Keneally, will be coming in to speak to us on the 30th of April about her novel, When We Have Wings. It's a beautiful work. It's, let's say it's crime set in a fantasy world a fantasy future where we now have the ability to fly. Fascinating book, shortlisted for the Barbara Jefferis Award, shortlisted for the Ned Kelly Award. So I hope you'll come along to that. That's bookings only for that event. So you can either talk to the library to book or see me after the talk to book. On that note, if you'd like to hear all the news about our events, there is an e-news sign-up sheet at the door. There's also a Tom Keneally Centre guest book if you'd like to write down that you've been here. And you can also keep an eye out for our flyers here at WEA, and also we're on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you very, very much for coming today, and I think it would be lovely to give Stephanie another round of applause.